The autumn wind carried whispers of change as Rose Jensen stood frozen on the porch steps of her family's ranch, the silver moonlight illuminating her tear-streaked face. It was 1876 in the untamed Arizona territory, and at 22, she had just lost everything: her father to consumption, her mother years before, and now their struggling cattle ranch to debt collectors who would arrive by week's end. "You shouldn't be out here alone, Miss Jensen," came a deep voice from the darkness. Rose startled, her hand flying to her throat. Preston Cooper emerged from the shadows, his tall frame silhouetted against the starlit sky. At 26, he was her father's most trusted ranch hand, a man of few words but steadfast loyalty. "Mr. Cooper," she acknowledged, hastily wiping her tears. "I thought everyone had gone to town." "Not everyone," he replied, stepping closer. The light from the lantern hanging by the door revealed his sun-weathered face, kind eyes, and the concern etched across his features. "I couldn't leave you here alone. Not with the news about the bank taking the property." Rose clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "By Friday, I'll have nowhere to go. Everything my father built gone." Preston's gaze traveled toward the barn where a small loft housed his few possessions. For 4 years, he'd worked this land, watching Rose grow from a headstrong girl into a determined woman who'd nursed her father through his final days without complaint. "You must be exhausted," he said softly. "You've barely slept in weeks." "I cannot sleep when there's so much uncertainty," she confessed. Preston removed his hat, revealing tousled dark hair. "Miss Jensen Rose," he corrected himself, the intimacy of using her given name not lost on either of them. "You need rest. Tomorrow, we can figure out what comes next." "There is no we, Mr. Cooper," she said, though without conviction. "You should find work elsewhere before the bank comes. I've nothing to pay you with." "I didn't stay for pay," he said simply. The night air grew colder as they stood in weighted silence. Rose swayed slightly from exhaustion, and Preston moved closer, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "You need to sleep," he insisted, his voice low. Rose nodded, too tired to argue. When she turned toward the door, her legs buckled beneath her. Preston caught her effortlessly, concern darkening his features. "I'm fine," she protested weakly. Preston glanced at the main house, then toward the barn. "The house is cold, and I haven't had time to chop more wood," he explained. "But the barn is warm from the animals, and I've got a fire going in the stove up in the loft." Rose passed the porch steps at night. The cowboy said, "To the loft, I'll carry you up." She should have protested. A proper lady wouldn't allow such familiarity. But Rose was beyond propriety, beyond caring what the gossips in town might say. She simply nodded, surrendering to his strength as he lifted her into his arms. The barn was indeed warmer than the house. Preston carried her up the narrow stairs to the small loft where he'd made his home these past years. It was sparse but neat, a small iron stove radiating heat, a narrow bed with clean blankets, a trunk for his belongings, and a chair by a makeshift table. He placed her gently on the bed. "Rest here tonight. I'll take the floor." "This is your bed," Rose protested weakly. "And you're the daughter of the man who gave me a chance when no one else would," Preston replied, pulling a blanket over her. "Your father was a good man. He'd want you taken care of." Rose fought the tears that threatened. "What will I do, Preston? Where will I go?" Preston knelt beside the bed, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about that. I have a small claim north of here. Not much, just a parcel of land my uncle left me. I've been working on a cabin there when I have time away from the ranch." "You never mentioned this," Rose said, surprised. "Never had reason to," he replied, stoking the fire in the stove. "It's nothing like this place, but it's something. And it's paid for." Rose watched him, noting how the firelight caught the angles of his face. She'd always found Preston Cooper handsome in a quiet way, but had never allowed herself to dwell on such thoughts. He was an employee, and she the daughter of the ranch owner. But tonight, with all conventions stripped away, she saw him differently. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked softly. Preston turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Because I'm offering you a choice, River Rose. You could come with me." "As what?" she asked, her heart suddenly racing. Preston's gaze held hers steadily. "That would be for you to decide." The weight of his words hung between them. River Rose closed her eyes, overwhelmed. "I need time to think." "Of course," he said gently. "Sleep now. Tomorrow is soon enough for decisions." Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion claimed River Rose quickly. She drifted off to the comforting sounds of Preston moving quietly about the loft and the soft whisper of the wind through the barn rafters. Morning came with golden light streaming through the small window of the loft. River Rose awoke disoriented, then remembered the events of the night before. She sat up quickly, finding herself alone in the loft. The stove still radiated warmth, and a cup of coffee steamed on the small table beside a plate of biscuits. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and moved to the table. A note in Preston's neat handwriting lay beside the plate. "Gonna speak with Mr. Franklin at the bank. Back by noon. Rest." River Rose felt a flutter of both anxiety and hope. What could Preston possibly say to change the bank's decision? She ate slowly, considering his offer from the night before. Going with him to his land would mean what exactly? He hadn't proposed marriage, but the implication hung in the air. Did she want that? Did she even know him well enough? Yet as she pondered, River Rose realized she didn't know Preston Cooper. For 4 years, she'd watched him work tirelessly, speak honestly, and treat everyone with respect. He'd sat with her father in the evenings, listening to stories of the old days. He'd taught River Rose herself how to mend fences and track strays when they couldn't afford to hire more hands. By midday, River Rose had made herself presentable and descended from the loft. She walked to the corral where several horses still remained soon to be bank property as well. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention, and she turned to see Preston riding in, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Cooper," she called, meeting him as he dismounted. "What news from town?" Preston removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "I've bought us a week," he said. Mr. Franklin agreed to delay the foreclosure until next Friday. "How?" River Rose asked, bewildered. "I paid the interest due," Preston said simply. River Rose stared at him. "You paid? With what money?" "I've been saving," he replied with a shrug. "It's not much, but it gives us time to salvage what we can. Your father's personal effects, your mother's things. Whatever you want to take when you leave." "When I leave," she repeated softly. "Have you decided I'm coming with you then?" A hint of a smile touched Preston's lips. "I've decided nothing, Miss Jensen. The choice is entirely yours." Over the next days, they worked side by side, sorting through the ranch house, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. River Rose found herself learning more about Preston Cooper than she had in 4 years of him working for her father. He was from Missouri originally, had fought briefly in the war despite being only 16, and had drifted west afterward, seeking a fresh start. "My uncle left me that land 3 years ago," he explained as they packed her mother's china. "It's not much, 100 acres with good water and some timber. I've been working on it when I could get away." "Why didn't you just leave here and work on it full-time?" River Rose asked. Preston's hands stilled. "Your father needed help, and I gave my word I'd stay on." "But surely after he fell ill, especially then," Preston interrupted gently. "He worried about you. Asked me to look after things, to make sure you weren't alone." River Rose set down the plate she was wrapping. "He asked you to stay for me?" Preston nodded. He knew what was coming with the bank. Knew there wasn't enough money to keep things going. "He made me promise I'd make sure you had somewhere to go." "So, your offer, it was out of obligation to my father?" River Rose felt a sudden hollowness in her chest. Preston looked at her directly. The promise to look after you was to your father. The offer of sharing my life with you, that's mine alone. The days passed in a blur of work and quiet conversations. Each evening, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the landscape in gold and crimson. River Rose found herself studying Preston when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved with quiet efficiency, the rare smile that transformed his serious face, the gentle way he spoke to the horses. On the fourth evening, as they sat drinking coffee on the porch, River Rose finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "What would it mean, Preston? If I came with you?" He set his cup down carefully. "It would mean whatever you want it to mean. I can offer you protection, a place to stay. Or I can offer you more, if that's what you desire." "More," she pressed. Preston turned to face her, his eyes serious. "I'm offering you a partnership, River Rose. A life built together. Marriage, if you'll have me. Or simply a friend to rely on, if that's all you want." River Rose's heart hammered in her chest. "You're proposing? Inelegantly, it seems," he said with a soft laugh. "But yes, I've admired you for longer than I should admit. Your strength, your kindness. How you stayed here when you could have gone east to your mother's people. How you kept this place running alongside your father when most women would have given up. You never said anything. You were the boss's daughter," Preston said simply. "It wasn't my place." River Rose considered his words. "And what if I say no? What if I decide to go to my aunt in Boston? Then I'll make sure you get there safely," Preston replied without hesitation. "And I'll wish you well." His selflessness touched her deeply. Here was a man offering everything, he had modest, though it was with no guarantees of acceptance. The fifth day brought unexpected news. Preston returned from town with a letter addressed to River Rose from a lawyer in Denver. Her hands trembled as she read it. "My father had mining shares," she said in disbelief. "In Colorado. The lawyer says they've struck silver, and the shares are worth something now. Not a fortune, but enough to start fresh," Preston finished for her, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "That's wonderful news, River Rose." She looked up at him, studying his reaction. "It would be enough to save the ranch if we acted quickly." Preston's smile dimmed slightly. "Is that what you want? To stay here?" River Rose considered the question seriously. The ranch held her childhood memories, her parents' dreams. But it also held years of struggle, of watching her father work himself to exhaustion for diminishing returns. "No," she said finally. "This place has too many ghosts. But the money changes things. I wouldn't come to you empty-handed." "I never expected anything from you but your company," Preston said quietly. That night, they sat by the fire in the main house, the future stretching before them with new possibilities. River Rose studied Preston's profile as he stoked the flames, seeing him truly for perhaps the first time not as her father's hired hand, but as a man of integrity, of quiet strength. "If I were to accept your proposal," she said carefully, "would we leave immediately?" Preston turned to her, firelight dancing across his features. "We could. Or we could wait until spring, when building would be easier. The cabin I've started is small, just 2 rooms so far." "Tell me about this land of yours," River Rose requested. Preston's eyes lit up as he described the valley, the creek running through it, the stand of pines on the northern border. "There's good grazing for cattle. Not hundreds like your father ran, but enough for a modest herd. The soil's rich for growing, too." As he spoke, River Rose could envision it a small house with a garden, cattle grazing on the hillside, perhaps children someday playing in the yard. The image brought unexpected tears to her eyes. "River Rose?" Preston asked, concern in his voice. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said, wiping her eyes. "I was just thinking that it sounds like a good place to build a life." The 6th day dawned with renewed purpose. They rode to town together to speak with the banker and the lawyer who handled local affairs. The mining shares would take time to liquidate, but Mr. Franklin was willing to extend the deadline with proper documentation. As they walked down the main street afterward, River Rose was acutely aware of the curious glances thrown their way. Preston Cooper and River Rose Jensen, side by side in daylight, speaking in hushed, intimate tones. It was fodder for gossip. "People are staring," she muttered. Preston shrugged. "Let them. We've done nothing wrong." They stopped at the general store where River Rose selected fabric for new curtains and Preston purchased seeds for spring planting. The simple domesticity of the task felt both foreign and right. As they were leaving, they encountered Mrs. Davidson, the preacher's wife and town busybody. Her eyes widened at the sight of them together. "Miss Jensen," she said coolly, "I heard about your father's passing. Such a shame about the ranch, too. I suppose you'll be heading east to your mother's people?" Before River Rose could respond, Preston stepped closer to her side. "Actually, Mrs. Davidson, Miss Jensen has agreed to become my wife. We'll be settling on my land north of here." The boldness of his announcement made before River Rose had officially accepted left her momentarily speechless. Mrs. Davidson looked equally shocked. "I see," the older woman said, recovering quickly. "Well, I'm sure Preacher Davidson would be happy to perform the ceremony before you depart together." The implication was clear, and River Rose felt her cheeks flush. Preston, however, remained unfazed. "That's very kind of you to offer," he said pleasantly. "We'll be sure to call on him when we're ready." As they walked back to their horses, River Rose finally found her voice. "Your wife?" she questioned, though there was more amusement than anger in her tone. Preston had the grace to look sheepish. "I apologize for speaking out of turn. Mrs. Davidson has a way of making assumptions that aren't flattering. I wanted to protect your reputation." "By claiming me as your fiancé?" "By stating my intentions openly," he corrected. "Though I admit I should have waited for your answer first." River Rose smiled despite herself. "And what makes you so certain of my answer, Mr. Cooper?" Preston stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "I'm not certain at all, but I'm hopeful." His honesty disarmed her. They mounted their horses and rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, each lost in thought. That evening, after dinner, Preston announced he needed to check on a loose board in the barn roof. River Rose watched from the porch as he moved across the yard, his figure silhouetted against the deepening twilight. She had come to appreciate his steady presence, his quiet strength. The thought of facing an uncertain future with him by her side no longer frightened her. Instead, it offered comfort. Making a decision, River Rose followed him to the barn. She found him in the stall below the loft, gathering tools. "Preston," she called softly. He turned, surprise registering on his face. "River Rose? Is something wrong?" "No," she said, moving closer. I've made my decision." Preston set down the hammer he was holding, giving her his full attention. "And yes," she said simply. "My answer is yes. I will marry you." The transformation of his expression was immediate surprise giving way to joy, his normally serious face breaking into a wide smile that reached his eyes. "You're certain?" he asked, closing the distance between them. "I am," River Rose confirmed. "These past days have shown me who you truly are, Preston Cooper. A good man.
Un honorable man.
Someone I could build a life with." Preston reached for her hands, holding them in his larger ones. "I'll work every day to be worthy of your trust," he promised. "I know you will," she said softly. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, River Rose rose on her tiptoes, meeting his lips with her own. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened with newfound certainty. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "We should go see the preacher tomorrow," Preston suggested, his voice husky. River Rose nodded.
"Yes.
I see no reason to wait." The final day before the bank's deadline dawned bright and clear. River Rose rose early, donning her mother's blue dress, the finest garment she owned. Preston had ridden into town at first light to speak with the preacher and returned with news that Reverend Davidson would perform the ceremony at noon. "Are you nervous?" Preston asked as they rode side by side toward town. River Rose considered the question. "Strangely, no," she answered honestly. "It feels right." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Only a handful of people attended: Mr. Franklin from the bank, the general store owner and his wife, and the blacksmith who had always been kind to River Rose's father. They stood before Reverend Davidson in the small white church, exchanging vows and simple rings that Preston had purchased with some of his savings. "I, Preston James Cooper, take you, River Rose Jensen, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death parts us." When River Rose repeated the words, she felt their weight and promise. This was not a marriage of mere convenience or necessity, she realized. Somewhere in the past week, perhaps even before, genuine affection had taken root. After the ceremony, they shared a meal at the town's small restaurant, accepting congratulations from well-wishers. By mid-afternoon, they were riding back to the ranch, their temporary home, for just one more night before they would load their wagon and head north to Preston's land. As twilight descended, they stood together on the porch of the ranch house, looking out over the property that had been in the Jensen family for 2 generations. "Are you sad to leave it?" Preston asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Yes and no," River Rose answered thoughtfully. "This place holds my childhood, my parents' dreams. But it also represents struggle and heartache. I'm ready for a fresh start, Preston. With you." They retired to the main house that night, their first as husband and wife. Preston had moved his few belongings from the barn loft, and they sat before the fire, planning their departure the next morning. "The cabin isn't much," Preston cautioned again. "We'll need to expand it come spring." "We'll build it together," River Rose assured him. "I'm stronger than I look." "I know exactly how strong you are," Preston said, his voice warm with admiration. "It's one of the many reasons I love you." The words, spoken plainly and without pretense, caught River Rose by surprise. "You love me?" she asked softly. Preston nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. "I should have said so before asking you to marry me, I suppose. But yes, River Rose Cooper. I love you. Have for some time now." River Rose felt tears prick her eyes. "No one's called me that yet. River Rose Cooper." "Do you like the sound of it?" he asked. She moved closer to him on the small sofa.
Ida.
"And Preston." "Yes, I think I may love you too," she admitted. "I'm not sure when it started. Perhaps when you carried me to the loft that night. Or maybe earlier, when I wasn't ready to admit it even to myself." Preston's kiss was tender, reverent. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were dark with emotion. "I'll spend our lifetime making sure you never regret those words." The next morning dawned crisp and clear. They loaded the wagon with River Rose's belongings and the household items they had decided to keep. Mr. Franklin arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, legal papers in hand. "Everything appears to be in order, Mrs. Cooper," he said, still getting used to her new name. "Once the mining shares are liquidated, we'll forward the balance to you at the address you've provided." "Thank you, Mr. Franklin," River Rose said, shaking his hand. "For everything." As the banker departed, Preston finished hitching the horses to the wagon. "Are you ready?" he asked, offering his hand to help her up to the seat. River Rose took one last look at the ranch house, the corral, the distant hills where she had ridden as a child. Then she turned to her husband, placing her hand in his. "I'm ready," she said with certainty. They traveled north through the day, Preston pointing out landmarks, describing the boundaries of their new home. As the sun began to set, He directed the horses down a narrow trail that opened suddenly into a beautiful valley cradled between gentle hills. "There," Preston said, pointing to a small cabin nestled against a stand of pines. "That's our home." River Rose felt her breath catch at the beauty of the place, the creek sparkling in the last rays of sunlight, the rolling meadows, the mountains in the distance. "It's perfect," she whispered. They reached the cabin just as dusk was falling. Preston set the brake on the wagon and jumped down, coming around to her side. "Wait," he said, a shy smile playing across his lips. "There's a tradition to uphold." Without warning, he swept her into his arms. River Rose laughed in surprise, wrapping her arms around his neck. "What are you doing?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "Carrying my bride across the threshold," Preston replied, moving toward the cabin door. Or, in this case, up the steps. As he carried her up the rough-hewn steps to their new home, River Rose felt a profound sense of rightness, of belonging. This was where she was meant to be, not in the grand ranch house of her childhood, but in this simple cabin with a man who valued her strength as much as he cherished her heart. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cooper," Preston said softly, setting her down just inside the door. River Rose turned in a small circle, taking in the modest but well-crafted interior, the stone fireplace, the simple table and chairs, the bed in the corner covered with a patchwork quilt. "Our home," she corrected, turning back to him with a smile. "Ours to build, to grow, to fill with life and love." Preston closed the distance between them, gathering her in his arms. "I promise you, River Rose, we'll make a good life here." As twilight deepened into night outside their window, River Rose Jensen Cooper knew with absolute certainty that the promise would be kept. This cowboy who had carried her up to his loft on the darkest night of her life had also carried her heart to a place of safety, of hope, of love. Their journey was just beginning, but they would travel it together, step by step, day by day, building a future neither could have imagined alone.